Two different men on two different occasions came to Jesus with the exact same question. And the question was this: what must I do to gain eternal life? Now, this really is the most important question that anyone could ask. And how did Jesus respond? Well, he pointed them to God's law. And it came down to the greatest commandment. What was that? He told them, you are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second greatest commandment was to love others as oneself. Now, this is where he had directed them to. Surprisingly, both of these men had thought that they had fulfilled this command, but Jesus didn't buy it. It was interesting that it was maybe 10 years ago I found myself invited to a church to preach, and just as a visiting preacher. And I spent a good 35 minutes preaching on who Jesus is, why he came, and what he accomplished. When the service was finished, I walked over to the tea and coffee area and I saw this big man, an elderly man, quite tall. He was frustrated. He had a big frown on his face, and I approached him to speak with him, and he said to me in these words as much. He said, what was the point of all of that preaching? You went on and on and on, and you went through and wasted all of this time. Christianity is so simple. It's as simple as this: love God and love one another. And I said to him, well, you're right, it is quite simple, isn't it? But that's exactly the reason why I preach to you who Jesus is, because you have never, ever kept that command for one day of your life, and neither have I. So this was the discussion that we had. Now, when we think about this, who gets into heaven? Who are those deserving of hell? Well, is it the rapist? Is it the murderer? Is it the pedophile? Is it the fraud? Who is it? Well, surely these people would go to hell, but I think that the obvious answer to that question is, what is the greatest sin? Well, the answer must be to break the greatest commandment. It only makes sense. So if the greatest commandment is to love God with all our heart, and we don't do that, then we are guilty of the greatest sin. Think about that. Every single day of our lives, every waking breath that we have had, we have never fulfilled that command one day of our lives. And we are all absolutely guilty of it. So how are we to gain eternal life? Where was the answer to be found for these two men? Well, the answer was standing right in front of them. The only one who ever loved God with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength always, and loved others as himself, was standing in front of them. A complete contrast in everything that they are not. And he comes, this one whom God is pleased with, and he comes to die in the place of those who do not love God with all their hearts, those who have offended God, broken his law. He comes to die in their place, and now he invites us all, come and believe in me for the forgiveness of sins, for eternal life, and to be pardoned from all of your crimes. Truly the one standing in front of them is the answer for them and for us.